The Sea of Forgetfulness stretched out like an endless expanse of ink, a place where all the world's sins were cast away, never to resurface, except in the most twisted of ways. Its waters were shrouded in mystery, an evil that whispered on the wind to those who dared to wander too close. Octavia, a curious teenager with unruly chocolate curls and a mind full of her mother's African tales, had grown up hearing nautical stories, each more thrilling than the last. Her mother would tuck her in at night, spinning yarns about brave sailors, monstrous creatures, and magical fishes. But as Octavia grew older, the stories her mother shared became more light-hearted. Nothing of the dark myths, nothing of the real dangers that lurked in the depths of the sea that lay not too far from home. Octavia lived in a small coastal town, a place so isolated that tourists rarely stumbled upon its shores. But when they did, the locals would warn them of the sea, cautioning them against venturing too close. The water was treacherous, they'd say, a place where no good could come and all happiness is lost. But warnings were often ignored by those who saw the ocean as just another picturesque backdrop to their prideful vacations and Instagram selfies. Insta stories, whatever you call those things. Patrick, or Rick as Octavia affectionately called him, was her best friend, a thoughtful and protective young man with a strong sense of duty. Rick had grown up on the same stories as Octavia, but unlike her, he took them to heart. He didn't take anything lightly. In fact, friends often joked his expressions were so serious that you couldn't tell if he was happy, sad, mad, irritated, or just plain constipated. Anyway, let's get back to the story. His grandmother, a woman who claimed to have seen the Sea Empress with her own eyes, had filled his head with tales of the evil that resided in the Sea of Forgetfulness. One warm summer day, Octavia, Rick, and a few other friends decided to explore the less-travelled parts of the coast. They laughed and played, their voices carried away by the breeze, unaware that they were drawing closer to the most feared part of the shoreline, the forbidden waters of the Sea of Forgetfulness. As the group of friends chased each other across the sands, Octavia noticed something peculiar in the distance. The waves, which had been crashing rhythmically against the shore, suddenly ceased. The sea became unnaturally still, its surface as smooth as glass, reflecting the dull, overcast sky above. Octavia, always the curious one, wandered further down the beach, her bare feet leaving shallow prints in the damp sand. Her friends' voices became muffled as if the sea itself was swallowing their words. She spotted a thick black foam bubbling up on the shore, a substance that seemed out of place in the usually pristine waters. Kneeling down, Octavia reached out to touch the foam. The texture was odd, almost like tar, and as her fingers neared it, a chill ran down her spine. The wind died and an eerie silence fell over the beach. The sea was utterly still, too still. Before she could react, Rick came barreling toward her, panic etched across his face. Without a word, he grabbed her, pulling her away from the water with a force she hadn't known he possessed. They ran, his grip tight on her arm, their feet pounding against the sand until they reached the safety of the northern shore where their other friends stood, eyes wide with fear. "What's wrong with you?" Octavia gasped, trying to catch her breath. She looked back at the sea, now so calm it was as if nothing had happened. "Why did you—" Rick cut her off, his voice low and urgent. "Octavia, it's not safe. Not here. Not by that sea." She frowned, confused by the terror in his eyes. "Rick, what are you talking about? It's just water." "It's not just water, Tavia," Rick replied, his voice trembling. "It's the Sea Empress. Haven't you heard the stories?" Octavia shook her head. "I don't remember anything about a Sea Empress. My mom just said don't get too close to the ocean. I don't see the big deal." Rick took a deep breath, glancing back at the water. "There's more to it. My grandmother told me. When the Sea Empress is watching, the water becomes eerily still, like it just did. No sound, no crashing waves, nothing. A black foam rises to the surface, and then she comes, cloaked in darkness, with eyes that glow like burning coals. Octavia felt a chill run through her. She had always thought her mother's stories were just that. Stories, fairy tales. Nothing that could actually have any truth to it. But the fear in Rick's eyes made her reconsider. "What does she want?" she whispered. Rick's gaze was distant, as if recalling a nightmare. "She's the keeper of all the world's sins. They say she drags people down into the sea, claiming them as her own, turning them into part of her cursed domain. No one who sees her lives to tell the tale." Octavia looked at Patrick with suspicion. "No one lives after seeing the Empress. If that's the case, why is your grandmother still alive? Stop lying, Rick." "Obviously she got away from—" Just as Rick was speaking, a distant rumble echoed across the beach. The sea, which had been unnervingly still, began to churn. In the distance, a dark shape started to rise from the water. It was massive, draped in what looked like a black cloak, its edges rippling as though made of the very shadows of the deep. As the figure emerged, two large, glowing yellow eyes appeared, peering out from beneath the waves, locked onto the shore where Octavia and Rick stood. The friends on the northern shore screamed in terror, their cries blending with the roar of the sea. Some began to run, their fear propelling them away from the shore, while others stood frozen, transfixed by the sight of the monstrous figure. Octavia's heart pounded in her chest as she grabbed Rick's hand. "We need to get out of here now!" But as they turned to flee, the sea erupted. A massive wave, dark and towering, surged toward the shore, and within it, the demonic figure seemed to grow, its features becoming clearer. It was the Sea Empress, her eyes blazing with malevolent intent, her form twisting within the water as though she was both part of the wave and controlling it. "Run!" Rick shouted, pulling Octavia with him. The two of them sprinted across the sand, the sound of the wave crashing down behind them deafening. The others were already far ahead, but Octavia felt the ground beneath her tremble as the wave struck the shore, the force of it sending shockwaves through the beach. She dared a glance back and saw the Empress fully formed, her cloak of darkness spreading across the water like a shroud. Her eyes bore into Octavia, and for a moment, the teenager felt an overwhelming sense of despair, as if all the world's sorrows were bearing down on her. But Rick didn't stop. He pulled her along, his determination unwavering. They reached the safety of the cliffside, where the others had taken shelter, and as they turned to face the sea, they saw the Empress recede, sinking back into the depths from whence she came. The sea returned to its unnatural stillness, the black foam dissolving into the waves. Panting, Octavia and Rick collapsed onto the ground, their bodies trembling from the adrenaline. The others were silent, their eyes wide with disbelief. "She'll come again," Rick said quietly, breaking the silence. "She always does." Octavia stared out at the sea, now calm and deceptively peaceful. She knew Rick was right. The Sea Empress would return, as she always did, to claim those who dared to challenge her domain. But Octavia also knew that she couldn't stay away. The Sea of Forgetfulness had called to her once, and she had a feeling it would call again. And when it did, Octavia would be ready. The stories her mother had told her would no longer be just tales to her. They would be her guide, her protection against the darkness that lurked beneath the waves. For in the heart of the sea, where sins are forgotten but never forgiven, the Empress ruled, and Octavia had seen her face to face. The Sea Empress was real, and Octavia knew that their fates were now intertwined, bound by the ancient power of the sea. As the sun set on the horizon, casting the last of its light on the water, Octavia made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth about the Empress, about the Sea of Forgetfulness, and about the curse that had haunted her people for generations. For the Sea Empress was not just a myth, not just a story to scare children. She was the embodiment of the world's darkest secrets, and Octavia was determined to confront her, no matter the cost. The sea may have been evil, but Octavia knew that in the face of such darkness, the light of courage would always shine through. And in that light, even the Sea Empress could be defeated.